Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webcast, High Performance Accounts Payable, 7 Reasons to Automate Vendor Onboarding, Maintenance, and Vendor Master Cleansing. We're very excited to have all of you on board, and we appreciate your taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. My name is Anne-Marie Cochia, Director of Marketing at Canon Business Process Services, and I'll be your moderator for today's webcast. Before we get started, I do have a few quick housekeeping notes. To eliminate background noise, all participants have been muted. You will only be able to hear our presenters speak. If you'd like to ask us a question, you may do so at any time by clicking the chat button on the WebEx dashboard on the right side of your screen. Type your question, click send, and we'll try to address your question before the end of the webcast. Because we only have a limited time, we do apologize in advance if we are unable to address your question online, but we will be sure to follow up on any unanswered questions after the program. Lastly, we will be sharing an archived version of today's webcast with you after the session is complete. So this session is part of an accounts payable program that we've put together on how to achieve a high-performance accounts payable department. Today we're going to talk about the state of accounts payable, the vendor onboarding and maintenance challenges, paving the way for an AP department transformation, 7 reasons to automate your vendor onboarding and maintenance process, and then we'll provide you with some key takeaways. Before we get started, we will take just one moment, we promise just one moment, to give you a quick introduction to Canon Business Process Services for those of you that may not be familiar with us. We are a leader in business process outsourcing services with expertise in information and document-intensive processes. Canon Business Process Services provides quality managed services and technology that consistently contribute value to our clients through improved operational performance. Our services include business process outsourcing, document processing and imaging, records management and information governance, office services, facilities management, and e-discovery and litigation support. We are a Six Sigma organization and develop customized solutions for our clients that can be delivered on-site, off-site, or offshore. Finally, over the past 9 years, we have been recognized as one of the top 100 global outsourcing providers in the outsourcing industry. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our esteemed panelists for today. First up, we have Brian Cassidy. Brian is a business process outsourcing advisor here at Canon and brings over 20 years of experience as a finance professional in the entertainment, electronic media, and telecommunications industries. Brian has a proven track record implementing procure-to-pay solutions, including document scanning and data capture, approval workflow, vendor portal implementation, and adoption and change management best practices. Second up, we have Ted Ardelian. Ted is a director of R&D with over 25 years of experience working with clients on improving their business processes. He's presented at industry conferences and written numerous articles on a wide range of business process outsourcing topics. He has a great deal of expertise in achieving AP goals and improving business processes for clients. Brian and Ted, we're so glad to have you on board today. We thank you for carving out this time to share your expertise.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Nice to be here.
Nice to be here.
Thank you, Brian. And Ted, why don't you kick off the program for us today?
Sure. So we'll start by briefly talking about the state of accounts payable, and with that, we'll dive into the challenges that companies or accounts payable functions are facing today. Last year, we produced a study report in cooperation with the Institute of Finance and Management, and the report revealed a number of problems or issues facing the AP process or the invoice process, depending on how you look at it or where it is homed. And not surprisingly, paper invoices remains the biggest obstacle that companies are facing. And our report showed about 83% of invoices still arrive in paper, or what we call paper, or what we like to refer to as paper equivalent invoices, meaning that the invoices might be received via email attachments as PDFs or spreadsheets or what have you, but at the end of the day, companies end up printing the attachment and then initiating the workflow as if the invoice arrives in the paper format, the mail. Interestingly enough, organizations are still not implementing as much automation in the scanning and data capture phase of the invoice process when they receive the invoices in a paper format. Only about 20% of organizations are saying that they are actually using optical character recognition to speed up and automate and improve the quality of the data conversion and process. So there's a lot of room for improvement there. When you look at how many invoices come in and only a small fraction get converted in an automatic fashion using OCR. So that, of course, leads to manual invoice processing downstream after the invoice intake phase. And again, that results in more labor, more errors, higher cost, longer cycle times, and basically all the problems that we face today. Straight-through processing is very limited. 80% of organizations say that fewer than 25% of invoices are processed straight through. Straight through we define as the invoice moving through the accounts payable process from beginning to end, or from beginning until payment, without any manual handling or intervention, using software as the workflow automation tool to drive the invoice through the validation, approval, discrepancy resolution, and finally to the ready-to-pay stage. So all of these problems or situations basically result in manual workflow that is causing a lot of pain for organizations. And in our study, we wanted to find out more about what companies or finance and accounting executives see or think are the main problems or pain points. And invoice receipt and data entry is the first one that comes up, more frequently cited as the main problem. Invoice approval and routing being the second. Invoice matching, again, is a painful process or activity within the process that takes time and is a cause for error. We also asked about vendor onboarding, and basically what we have learned from this study is that about 32% of finance executives identify vendor onboarding as a top 3 or one of the top 3 AP pain points. Interestingly enough, also in the study, we also asked about supplier inquiries, and 28% of executives say supplier inquiries is also a pain point within the process. So these two points or pain points that I just outlined are going to be primarily the focus of our discussion today. And when you look at what might be the solution or the process to resolving some of these challenges, we summarize sort of the progression path that organizations are taking, that we are seeing organizations taking, and we're working with them to help them do that, go from the current state, which might be a manual processing or semi-automated processing, to a best-in-class high-performance AP. We summarize it through this maturity model, which basically shows us that at the low end, you have the manual processing, and as we all know what that is, it's sort of inefficient, it's slower, higher cost, and so on. The next step to improving the process is to centralize and digitize, centralize the invoice intake and receipt of all invoices, whether they are paper or electronic, centralize some of the AP functions that you have, and then the next step is to implement workflow automation to drive the approval and discrepancy resolution, driving the invoices electronically to the ready-to-pay stage. And there, companies are looking at implementing workflow tools for handling approvals and exceptions, integrations with ERP, using more or centralizing, standardizing processes through shared service centers or in some cases through outsourcing, and then implementing basic reporting and dashboarding to provide more visibility across the process. And finally, beyond that, once that technology is implemented, there is the further fine-tuning of the process by further implementing tools, further fine-tuning or adjusting or configuring the workflows, customizing the workflows, and so on to perfect the process and basically go after that highly coveted goal of straight-through processing. And of course, with that, there is also the challenge of onboarding suppliers to submitting e-invoices and eliminating the paper invoices from coming in the first place. So that's kind of the overview and a very brief overview at that. For those who are interested in this study, it's rather recent. You can reach out to one of us and we'll be happy to send it out to you. And you can take a look at the data that we've uncovered. We also have a prior study to this that we also produced the year before that you might want to take a look at that. And that covered basically the 3 steps and strategies organizations are taking to go from their current state to an optimized AP process. So this is, as I said, a very brief overview. And before I turn it over to Brian to talk about the 7 reasons to automate vendor onboarding and maintenance, we do have a poll question we would like to ask. And I'll ask Anne-Marie if you can read the poll question and execute the poll.
So we'd very much like to hear from our audience on the phone. And the question that we have for you is, which of these is your greatest vendor master challenge? Is it vendor information that is inaccurate or not up to date? Vendor master contains too many inactive vendors? Duplicate vendors? Maintaining compliance with internal policies? Or would you say all of the above? And we'll wait a few seconds here and have you tally the responses. We do appreciate the folks that are giving us their input here. And we are getting a nice number of responses here. So let's just wait a few seconds. Okay. So what we have here is vendor information is inaccurate. We have 11%. The highest response we got is all of the above at 26%. Pretty much 11 and 13% for our other responses.
So I'm not surprised that all of the above represent problems. According to our survey study, organizations basically say that the main problem is paper and all the ills that follow after that, and that is what our data shows. And I'll be interested to interested to hear what Brian has to, or what his take is on this.
Great. Well, thank you, Ted. So I'm also not surprised at those poll results. I think, you know, it's very common for organizations to be faced with the same issues with regard to their vendor master. It's a very challenging process. These issues, they accumulate over the years, and it's not uncommon for them to go uncorrected or uncleansed, if you will. And if there is an effort to cleanse the vendor master, typically, you know, it happens periodically, sporadically, and it can be somewhat half-heartedly. Multiple vendors is a problem that every company faces. Vendors set up more than once, duplicate vendors, missing and incomplete information, inactive vendors. How many times have you sent up a vendor only to have paid them once? Time transpires, and now they're inactive and they're cluttering up your database. Missing information like missing W-9s or potentially W-8s, or not verifying your TIN number. You know, these are risks that the AP department lives with, and frankly doesn't really have to live with it if there's a process in place to ensure that vendors get onboarded and maintenance properly. So why don't we go ahead and move to paving the way for transformation. I think there's quite a bit of agreement on what the issues are facing vendor master data. But as far as paving way, the way for transformation, I think it's very important to really realize the value that the vendor master plays in your P2P process. It's really the cornerstone of your P2P process. It touches both the beginning and the end of the process itself, and it supports a number of organizations, through, you know, units throughout your organization. Obviously, sourcing and procurement, but other organizations like tax and legal have a stake. Compliance has a stake in the information that's gathered and stored and maintained in your vendor master. And of course, usually this responsibility falls to AP. It's a difficult task, but it does illustrate that the data that's stored here is of very large value to different parts of your organization. So let's go to the next slide and talk for a moment about really what your vendor master could be and should be. You know, really what your vendor master is or could be is a strategic resource that supports different facets of your business. It should be a database that drives your business strategy. If your sourcing group is negotiating deals with suppliers, does your vendor master make those suppliers easily available to the people in procurement? You know, it's something that could really benefit the overall organization if it's managed, if it's set up correctly. Does your vendor master really manage risk or help you manage risk? Do you have a process in place for mitigating the risks associated with the one-time vendors or inactive vendors? You know, is your vendor master efficient? Is it easy for people to find what they're looking for? Do buyers go in, do a search, kind of a half-hearted search, can't find what they're looking for, throw up their hands, give up, and submit a new vendor request, only to create a duplicate vendor down the line? These kind of things are preventable, they're manageable, and will go a long way toward cleaning your vendor master, particularly around the onboarding process, and enabling it to become more of a strategic resource throughout your organization. So let's go to the next slide and talk for a moment about really how that transformation of your vendor onboarding process and the data that it collects, how that would happen. And really how it would happen is reaching out and collaborating with the different parts of the organization that have a stake in the information that's collected and how it's stored and how it's retrieved and how it's updated and how it's edited. There needs to be a real collaboration in determining what the process needs to be with sourcing, with procurement. AP will ultimately own the database, but by working with the different facets of the organization that have a stake in how this what information is collected, you're now laying the path to deploy a process that will be effective for the different organizations that rely on this information. So let's move to the next slide and talk about that transformation. So in the process of collaborating and working and identifying the data, you want to target a process that does gather the right data. You know, the technology, the automation piece is pivotal. It'll provide the backbone of the process, but it's really what you collect and what you gather that's meaningful for the organization at large that makes the difference. You'll be able to ensure, you want to ensure that every vendor is set up correctly and completely. I would recommend that you implement an approval workflow process, one that provides visibility to where vendor onboarding is, who it's with, and it provides ease of use. People can understand the process. They can make the process work. They know where to go to look up and find out if the vendor's been approved or if, who the vendor is with for evaluation. Okay, on the next slide, I've got an example of a potential automated vendor onboarding process. This is not the only process that you can employ, but it's one that I've seen before and I think is very effective. So typically over on the left, somebody embedded in the business, a buyer perhaps, would uncover a need, at least they think they do, to set up a new vendor. In an automated scenario, they would fill out a new vendor request, and that would get sent electronically to the sourcing group. Sourcing would then look at that request, they would evaluate the information, they would see if we have a vendor already approved that provides a similar good or service, and if they don't and approve it, they would then send an electronic invite to the supplier themselves. Supplier receives the electronic invitation, they sign on to the vendor portal, and they put in their important information. They attach their backup. They put in their name. They put in their legal name. They put in their mailing address, their remit-to address, their contact information. And hopefully they put in, if they want to be paid electronically, which they should be incentivized to do, they're going to be able to put in their bank details, their payment method. That information, including all the backup that supports it, it's submitted. Next stop, it goes to AP, who does a thoroughness check. They look to see that the backup corresponds to how the form was filled out. If they filled out the form incorrectly, they have the opportunity to reject it or send it back. But provided everything is correct, AP pushes the button, and then the vendor is set up officially in the ERP system, and it's made available through the portal. Once the vendor is set up in the ERP, the vendor is already registered through your portal process. You've already got them, in effect, onboarded invested into the vendor portal. They now have ownership of key parts of your vendor database. You've also got a record that's complete. There's no missing information in this process. And hopefully you've got banking details stored in your ERP in a secure way with very tight controls where that alleviates a lot of the concern around manual input and maintenance of bank details. You've developed a consistent, standard, automated onboarding approach. Okay.
Brian, excuse me, Brian, I do see that we have a write-in question, and the write-in question is, I see the greatest obstacle as vendor participation. What techniques or incentives have you seen work in getting vendors to embrace the use of the portal?
You know, that's a really good question. You know, vendors can be reluctant to do something new and do something different. We do live in a self-service world, though, where increasingly people are comfortable looking up information, getting answers on their own without picking up the phone. There are a lot of benefits for your suppliers to signing up and submitting, taking ownership of their vendor data, not the least of which is enabling the ability to get paid electronically. But it's more than that. It's really taking ownership of their data, making sure that it's correct, immediate real-time feedback, and then other benefits as well. You know, the ability to see purchase orders in the system, the ability to see and submit true electronic invoices, and to get payment information. Not all your suppliers are going to do this. Depending on the nature of your business, you may be in a position to require them to sign up, but most companies don't. It's something that they offer. Another thing you can do is to target certain suppliers that you know to be pain points or high volume suppliers that you'd really like to see automated more, and walk them through the process. I've seen that work very effectively. And slowly but surely, you know, I think over time, vendors will see the benefit and step up. Okay, let's now move to the 7 reasons for automating your onboarding process. So at the top of the list, I've got Supplier Self-Service. I think this is a really pivotal sea change in getting your suppliers to take ownership of their information. You know, in a paper-based and manual process, oftentimes important changes, legal name changes, maybe they're working under a DBA, maybe they've got different banking details. These things go unupdated in your vendor master and become stale and out of date and causes problems throughout your purchase-to-pay process. Getting vendors comfortable with updating their information, making it real-time and effective, alleviates a lot of problems downstream. So that's number one. Number two, enabling electronic payments. I can't really emphasize enough the benefit of electronic payments versus check. I mean, there are companies now that are really getting away from checks just because they're so problematic. In fact, they're offering, in some cases, they're not offering the ability to be paid by check. And if the supplier insists, they do checks once a month. I mean, checks really are challenging. The problem with ACH and electronic payments is oftentimes you don't have a good, secure way of getting vendor bank details. Providing a portal where they can submit their bank account and their ABA routing number in a secure fashion is a quantum leap forward in getting suppliers to be paid via ACH. Okay, benefit number three, true electronic invoicing. So by electronic invoicing, I don't mean where they email an attached PDF of their invoice. That's not really an electronic invoice. You're still subject to what they did or did not include on their invoice. A true electronic invoice is one where they enter it in through the portal. Perhaps they find a PO and they flip it into an invoice, ensuring a perfect match. But this guarantees, this method, electronic entry of their invoice, guarantees that it comes in with everything that you need to route it for approval, to code it properly if you need to post it, and to pay it. Eliminating exceptions, minimizing manual involvement. This is the direction the industry is going. The vendor portal, which they've already registered for as part of the onboarding process, is now just a small step away for the supplier to submit electronically. Okay, next. I like this one a lot. Having worked in the AP area most of my career, I can attest to the fact that AP groups are oftentimes under duress from the minute they walk in the door to the moment they leave. The phone rings, email inboxes are filling up, there's a constant inquiries going on. Vendor self-service enabled through an electronic portal is an effective way for suppliers to get answers to the questions. It's a very effective way for them to verify their information is set up correctly, verify that we've received their invoice, see where that invoice is in the approval process, or if it's a purchase order invoice that's already posted, see when it's going to be paid. I mean, that's going to alleviate and handle most of the common questions that come in from your suppliers. Another thing a portal will do is to give you the ability to really refine when you pay that invoice or when that invoice is due. If you're a company that really wants to pay based on due date, which is the term, typically the term is calculated based on the date of the invoice, which the supplier controls. And I have seen situations where suppliers will backdate their invoices once they learn that's how it works and get paid much quicker than they would ordinarily. Electronic submission really means that you have the ability to age it based on when you receive it, which is really, frankly, a huge win for the AP group. Oftentimes the fingers point about why something was paid late. Looking at the invoice doesn't really give you the answer. It's really when you received it that tells the full picture. Okay, let's move on.
I do have a write-in question for you that just came through. Can electronic invoicing be turned off?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. If it's not a process that works for your business, it's something that you don't have to enable. Absolutely. I mean, the focus today is really on the process of onboarding and maintaining the vendor data. One of the benefits of that is they've registered for the portal, and it would enable them, position your suppliers to take advantage of e-invoicing, true electronic invoicing. But if it's something that doesn't make sense for your business, it does not. Absolutely, it can be turned off.
I'd also like to add from other discussions that I've heard from talking with people is that many times organizations enroll suppliers into electronic invoicing as a way to force them. but many, for whatever reason, decide afterwards to terminate or to stop submitting invoices electronically. And that is just something that happens. Sometimes it has to do with cost, where they do not want to pay for the cost of being in the e-invoice process.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Ted. I think the e-invoicing that I'm referring to does not come with a cost. I mean, there are e-invoicing networks where you become a member, and those do have fees associated with them. What I'm talking about more is submitting an invoice through your vendor portal in an electronic form where you control the information that they submit so that things don't come in incomplete. That typically does not come with a cost. Good question. Okay. One of my favorite. You may not be able to eliminate duplicate vendors altogether. I mean, there are a lot of restrictions that are inherent to your ERP, whatever system you're on, and how it was configured. But automating the onboarding process and automating the maintenance process through a workflow process, as I described before, really positions you to minimize the volume of duplicate vendors that are coming into your process. If you have a one TIN number, one vendor policy, you're in a position to enforce it. You're in a position to reject requests that are incomplete, that are not valid. And another thing, which doesn't get discussed a lot, it's not the sexiest topic in the world, but does make a big difference, and that's enforcing a naming convention. Utilities, there are a certain class of vendors that are very difficult to standardize and make it easy for people to find and retrieve. And so naming conventions can be very helpful in cleaning up and organizing your vendor master. You're now in a position to enforce that, which is difficult to do in a manual paper-based process. Let's go to the next slide. And another thing I think that really goes uncommented upon is the improved visibility throughout your organization. Set your vendor database up correctly, gather the right information, and you can enable procurement to find vendors or suppliers based on what it is they need, what it is the supplier provides, by the type of supplier. You'll give them one central place to look. Oftentimes, there's more than one vendor master, which is part of the challenge in keeping this process clean. Pushing those vendors to a portal and providing a place for people to look gives you one single central repository, which is a major step in the right direction in bringing efficiencies out of the process. And then finally, efficiencies and lowering costs. Some people think this really should be at the top. I like the operational benefits associated with automating the vendor maintenance and onboarding process, but there's certainly no doubt that greater efficiency is going to lower your process costs. These vendors, they accumulate over years, and they become problematic to manage and deal with. There are costs associated with researching issues that arise from poor vendor data, and those costs can definitely be driven lower by maintaining a lean, a clean, tight vendor database, which is enabled through an automated workflow process. And then finally, I think we have some key takeaways.
Okay, with that, I'll summarize what we kind of talked about today and conclude the webcast. And as we talked so far, we are seeing challenges still remain inside the AP function and invoice process, one of which is dealing with vendor onboarding and vendor maintenance, maintaining vendor data. And as you just heard Brian talk about 7 points of action that can be taken to help alleviate that. The other point that we would like to talk about or to summarize is that there is room for improvement when it comes to onboarding suppliers. There are tools out there that can help automate that process, and the portal is one of them, which is, as Brian talked about, does not cost in terms of per transaction, or does not have to cost per transaction. Organizations that have implemented these kinds of automation or automating tools, whether it's the vendor portal or workflow automation, are seeing more straight-through processing throughout their invoice process, and partnering with procurement and internally, partnering with procurement, strategic sourcing, accounts payable, usually generates the greatest benefit and the fastest process in terms of implementing the solution or changing the solution, changing the process in order to help you address some of these challenges. Before we conclude, I'd just like to say a few things about the fact that Canon Business Process Services has and offers an accounts payable service that can help organizations implement technologies as necessary, or implement additional technologies in addition to what they have. Our service offering includes everything from receiving the invoices all the way through processing the invoices to the ready-to-pay stage. And we provide that service. We can provide that service on site. We can provide it through our processing centers here in the U.S. as far as the scanning and data extraction is concerned. And of course, we can provide it offshore for back-end processing, where we can reduce the labor and enhance the process further. Of course, with that, we can enhance the workflow by adding technology, our technology, or we can integrate our technology with existing technologies that clients have. Sometimes or oftentimes we see that organizations have technologies, but they could be enhanced a little bit, and we provide that enhancement that is necessary. Of course, one of the benefits here is that, as most of you know, it takes a project to implement any technology inside companies, and sometimes that project could be long, could be years. Since we already have this already set up, organizations see a faster path by bypassing the purchasing of technology and internal IT implementation projects that are often a barrier to getting things done. So a benefit is to, or a consideration could be to look outside and see what you can get without having to spend your own capital money, because technology changes so often and requires maintenance, and more importantly, it requires people to take care of it and to upgrade it and so on. So sometimes using a ready-made application that fits your workflow and can be customized to your workflow might be the way to go. So that's kind of what we wanted to discuss today and conclude, so I'll turn it over to Anne-Marie.
So before we sign off today, I do see that we have a question in chat from our audience, and Brian, I'll throw this question your way. Our business has grown through acquisition. We have multiple systems. We do not even know where to start on developing one vendor master. Do you have any recommendations?
That's a great question. I think that's a common scenario. More than one vendor master, more than one system. It is an IT challenge, but basically a vendor portal would provide you one central location, one central repository where you can get your arms around your vendors from multiple different databases. So it's not a situation where you would need to set up multiple vendor portals, although if you wanted to, you could. But from a technical standpoint, I think it's pretty straightforward, really. Just aggregate all of your vendor masters in one central one central portal.
Okay, any more questions from our audience today? Just write them in chat and we'll try and address them here. We do have a few more minutes. We'll wait a few seconds. If you have some questions for us, we'd love to take them here. Okay, well, I would like to thank our presenters for their time today, and more importantly, I'd like to thank our attendees for participating in today's program. Okay, I do see one question before we head off. Does the portal interface with existing accounting systems? Brian, do you want to take that one?
Sure, yeah, typically, I mean, it depends on how you want to set it up, but typically it would interface with your accounting system. You want to enable your suppliers to see their purchase orders if you're a PO-based organization. You want to enable suppliers to see invoices and to see payment data. So yes, the answer is that you would want to integrate. You don't have to. You can keep it, you know, the integration points to a minimum, but I think there are large benefits to the organization by making that information available through the portal.
Okay. All right, well, that concludes today's session, and once again, I want to thank our attendees for participating today. We hope you found the insights helpful and informative. If you have any additional questions for Ted or Brian, we would like to learn more about how Canon can help companies through transitions or vendor portal implementation, please go ahead and contact us directly. We have the phone numbers and the emails on the screen here. And thank you again, and I hope you enjoy your day.